Hello! Today Mr. Prest and I are going to be talking to you about the Rossall Diploma and about what is going to be happening with the publication of grades given that there are no exams taking place. Mr. Prest will be speaking in a moment about the information which Ofqual has published on the 15th of April and about the consultation which is taking place over the course of the next 2 weeks. The one thing that's most important to mention is that they've given us information about how they're going to collate and develop their statistical model for grading pupils. That model has two parts. The first part is the centre assessed grade, so that's the grade that every single school will put forward for every single pupil in the subject that they're studying. And secondly, it's the statistical models that the exam boards will overlay that with in order to work out what each pupil actually gets. I'm going to focus on the centre assessed part and then I'll hand over to Mr. Prest. In terms of centre assessed grades, we want to be as fair and transparent as possible for every single one of our pupils. We have a wealth of data available to us, which will mean that we will be able to predict with a great amount of certainty what it would be like, what the pupils would have been likely to get. We are going to use data that spans the entirety of the 2 years that the pupils have been doing their courses, and it will include a variety of different sources of information. The most important aspect of this is the teacher assessment. So this is the prediction that the teacher of every single pupil gives as a result of knowing them and teaching them over the course of the time that they've been doing their A-levels or their GCSEs or their IB. Within the teaching aspect, they will be looking at things like classwork, homework, in-class tests, any other exams, all sorts of different things that they would have been doing and the way that the teachers would have been assessing them. As well as those grades, we will then use a lot of other data that is available to us. This includes assessment grades, so those are the grades that go home on reports. It includes the most likely grades that we've been sort of sending home as well over the last year or so. It also includes coursework grades and it will include information that we get from the Rossall Diploma exams which are about to take place. Now those Rossall Diploma exams can't determine the grading themselves, but they are a good vehicle for determining whether our predictions are correct. In terms of the Rossall Diploma exams, you will know that these assessments will be taken remotely. They will take place from the 27th of April until the 15th of May. We have sent out exam timetables to pupils. We are in the process of organising invigilation, and we're also in the process of writing to parents and pupils about how the logistics of the exams will work. In short, it's worthwhile you knowing that all of the exams are planned to be taken remotely, that the majority of them will be exams that can be taken online either by filling in a Google form or a Google Doc. There are some exams which are going to be handwritten, and in those cases we will ask pupils to photograph and upload their work. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that we will be asking parents and pupils where possible to make sure that the pupil has 2 devices available to them, because they will need one device on which to do their work potentially and the other a device like a phone where they could have the camera on so that we can invigilate them while they're doing their work. Whether they use one device or 2 devices, it is the case that we do not need parents to supervise that. We know that many parents are working from home and so are going to be involved in doing that and not able to invigilate their sons and daughters. We think that we have a pretty robust system in place and we will be sending out further instructions as mentioned earlier, and if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. I'm now going to pass it over to Mr. Prest.
Thank you. So the first part of the process, as Ms. Porovic has said, is schools, colleges, etc. over the country submitting their centre assessment grades. And obviously, Ms. Porovic has just gone through how we will be determining those here at Rossall. What's then going to happen is that Ofqual, in conjunction with the exam boards, is going to standardise these across centres. And the aim of this for them is to ensure that the distribution of grades it follows a similar profile to that of previous years, based on the prior attainment of this cohort nationwide, their profile compared to that of profiles of previous cohorts. So the statistical standardisation that they're going to apply is going to draw on various different sources of evidence. So they've said that they're going to look at the expected grade distribution for different subjects given the prior attainment of the national entry. They've said that they're going to look at the prior attainment of this year's students within each centre. So that's Key Stage 2 data really for Year 11s and GCSE data for Year 13s. Now, it's I've written to Ofqual, and I'm sure colleagues and equivalents at lots of different centres will have done the same, to ask for some more clarity on this, because it's not exactly clear what they mean by that and exactly how that information will be used. I think for us as well, we've also, like a lot of independent schools, we have a lot of students who take IGCSEs, and we're not exactly sure if that's going to be included, or if so, how. So we've asked that question. And we also have a lot of students from overseas who don't have prior attainment in UK centres. And exam boards wouldn't necessarily have that information available to them. So we've asked for more clarity on that, and if and when we get that, obviously we'll share that with you. Ofqual have also said in their consultation on on their model that they're going to use historical outcomes for each centre. Now, it's worthwhile, before I talk about that, just clarifying that prior data and prior attainment for our Year 11s and for our upper sixth, however that does get used, like I said, we're asking for more clarity. It's the case that would only be used at the group level, not at the individual level. So it's not the case that the GCSE attainment of a student in Year 13 will determine their A-level outcomes. Now, as I said there, that the model is going to take into account the historical outcomes for each centre. That is something that we don't agree with. We think that it's particularly unfair on certain groups of students, and we think that the fact that Ofqual are likely to weight more heavily the statistical expectations than the central assessment grades is unfair. And the reason we think this is because we have a superb cohort in Year 13. It's a cohort which achieved very strongly at GCSE, both for our students who followed through from Year 11 with us here at Rossall, and from students who joined us from elsewhere. And we think that a model that places an emphasis on historical outcomes at Rossall is not a process which is going to be fair and is going to see our students necessarily getting the public examination results that they should have got. That's because in the models that we've had based on the data that Ms Porovic and I use, we were expecting an upturn, for example, in the A star to B rate of our A-level students of 15-20%, perhaps even higher. So we think this is fundamentally wrong. We think it's unfair, and it fails to take account of centres such as ours, where we were expecting to see a fairly dramatic improvement in public examination results. Now, this is a consultation, and of course we will be making representations to Ofqual and to various other bodies, explaining our unhappiness and our concerns about this statistical model. However, what we've got to do is to look at the situation that the nation, that all centres find themselves in at the moment, and to look at what we can do to mitigate outcomes where we think we have concerns. So, if, for example, we consider our Year 11 students, you will know that we've been in touch with our students here at Rossall in Year 11 to assure them that they have a place here at the sixth form, and that we will be in touch with them after the half term to talk about all their pre-A-level programmes, pre-IB programmes that we're putting together in order to make sure that they are in a superb position in September. So that's one thing that we've done because we think we owe it to you, and because we have confidence in your ability and confidence in the fact that the Rossall Diploma exams that Ms Porovic has talked about will give us a really good idea of your suitability for the different subjects at A-level and IB. For my Year 13s, I know that a lot of you are really, some of you have concerns about university, and obviously given the uncertainty and the situation we find ourselves in, that is understandable. Now, you have some absolutely superb offers from universities, and offers which are very much deserved, and for courses which were very sensible, whilst being aspirational as well, for you, for your ability and for the level of attainment that we are expecting to see you achieve. So what I will be doing is I'll be writing individual personalised letters for each Year 13 student who holds conditional offers at universities in the UK and, where appropriate, universities abroad, to make representations on your behalf, to outline your strengths, your attributes, the attainment that we've seen over the last 2 years, and to make clear to universities the reservations we have about the statistical manipulation of the central assessment grades that we will be giving. And this is something that a number of other schools, especially independent schools, are doing. And it's our understanding that universities are going to want to look at as many different data points or evidence, different examples of evidence for students' performance as possible, because it's likely that universities have their own reservations about the way in which public examination results, public qualifications that would normally be based on your public examinations will be delivered this year. So I will be writing those letters. I will be taking into account students' performance over the 2 years of the sixth form. Obviously, that will include, to an extent, performance in the Rossall Diploma, and that will be completed well in advance of the publication of your A-level results. Now, I know some students may want to know what happens after these results get published, and I've been looking at the consultation from Ofqual, so I can give you a bit more information about that. Now, it's likely that the appeals process, once these exam results are published, is going to be very narrow indeed, and it will probably be the case that appeals can only really be made by centres rather than by individual students, and that this will only be based on sort of process, whether administrative mistakes have been made in the submission or the standardisation of data. So if that's confirmed, it's very unlikely that individual students will be able to appeal, and it's almost certain that they won't be able to appeal the central assessment grade that schools or colleges have given, or the rankings that schools or colleges have given. Now, the latest information from Ofqual also makes reference to a possible exam series in the autumn. So if it's the case that a student is unhappy with their grade, doesn't think that it's fair, doesn't really have a basis to appeal, and therefore decides that they want to take an examination, a public examination, Ofqual have suggested that there will be some form of examination series in the autumn. Obviously, a date to be determined yet. Now, they are consulting on whether they whether they should merely allow exam boards to run exams in an autumn series, or whether they should essentially require exam boards to run a series. So if they only allow exam boards to run a series, it's not necessarily the case that all exams in all subjects in all exam boards will run. Now, this is a consultation that may change, and obviously when we get more information about that, that'll be at some point next month, we hope, we will let you know about that. The other thing to say is that with regards to coursework, if students decide they did want to take an exam in an autumn series, it's not exactly clear how coursework, where that's relevant for subjects, would be taken into account. Again, when we get more information about that, we'll let you know. And I think the final thing that is important for me to say is that obviously for Year 13 students especially, you will be leaving us, going off to fantastic university courses, apprenticeships, etc. But even once you've left, if you still have questions, if you still need support and guidance about appeals, about an autumn examination series, you need to know that, once you've been a member of this school, you will always be a Rossallian, and that support and guidance and information from Ms Porovic, myself, Ms Jones, Mr Quartermain, and all of your teachers here will still be available. And we just wanted to reassure you of that support in what we know for you is a particularly unsettling and uncertain time.
Thank you very much for listening. As I said earlier, if you've got any questions, please do feel free to email us and we will answer as quickly as we can. We wish you a lovely weekend.